Okay, everybody, we will make a start now on our second session of today. This is a single session with Professor Eivind Aadland. I met Eivind a year ago, probably, through a colleague, and I was struck with the multidisciplinary work Eivind was doing, integrating lots of academics into some really exciting projects. And he's agreed to come and present and talk to us today. So I will pass over to Eivind, and then in the end we will have time for a discussion and a chat. Thank you.
Thank you very much, James, for the invitation to present the Move Early project. It's an upcoming project. We are at the moment awaiting a final feedback on funding, but I look forward to present some ideas and from this project. So it's very nice to be here. My background is in public health, so look forward to present this project in this environment. And the presenters before me has already given a really nice backdrop for a lot of the points and the theoretical background also of this project. The Move Early project is a large-scale interdisciplinary research and development project, and that also points towards a quite strong applied side of it. So that is an important point. So just very short, Move Early in a nutshell. So Move Early is supposed to target two worrisome trends in society that are counterproductive to child development, well-being, and life opportunities. So we will target increased levels of physical inactivity in young children from a public health perspective. And also we will target an increased schoolification of early childhood education, which are also a worrisome trend that are counterproductive, we believe. So both of these trends, they curtail young children's natural inclination to move, play, and explore. So the aim of the project is to design and test a responsive education intervention to promote movement, play, and exploration in early childhood education. So in that way, we will respond to recommendations to support broader education goals and development of the whole child to equipment with the competencies they need for the future. So I will start with the public health perspective, and you probably know the guidelines pretty well. So this is the guidelines for the early years up to 4 years. And already at an age of 3 to 4 years, children should spend at least 60 minutes per day in moderate to vigorous intensity. So this is the WHO guidelines, and Norwegian guidelines are revised at the moment. They will probably be similar in a short time. We know that a lot of children do not spend sufficient time in high activity. Of course, there's been development over time. A lot of evidence on developing and the trends of development of activity or inactivity are anecdotal because we lack very firm evidence of that. But I guess we recognize the screens taking a lot of time, both from children and adults. So there has been a call for children to spend more time in activity, both in general and also in childcare. And we have also some evidence from the largest study in Norway in this group of children. We have done in Sogn og Fjordane in the Western Norway. We find that about half of the children meet the recommendations. If you know a bit about accelerometry, you know that this can be discussed, of course, how we treat this data. But anyway, a lot of children spend quite a lot of time inactive. But what is very clear, and that's very interesting, is that we see that on a weekday, the children spend 77% of their time in moderate to vigorous intensity they get in the preschool setting. So, and as you know, there are more weekdays than weekends. So that is really, really important. So the early childhood education setting is really important for children's opportunities to be active. We find that physical activity, there's large variation in physical activity, increases over time. And some children have a very favorable trajectories over time, and some children do not. So especially those kids, of course, are very, very important to try to increase their activity level in general, in different settings. So of course, the public health perspective, you know, the trends in society over the last 20, 40, 60 years relating to obesity as a common denominator of a lot of different conditions. And that is really important. And we see this is just an association between physical fitness. We see the same association between physical activity and cardiometabolic health, risk factors for cardiovascular disease. They are pretty consistent in a lot of studies already at 10 years of age. We see that in this picture in all studies. It's very consistent. We have also shown clear associations between physical activity and body mass index in preschoolers. So there are quite weak associations in the 3 to 4-year-olds, but there are quite strong associations between higher intensities and body mass index already in very young children. So this is just an example of how physical activity relates to other health outcomes, and we see the same for motor skills and so on. So just to set the public health perspective on this. Then there is more and more evidence showing that exercising your muscles is also exercise for your brain. And we know that something happens in your brain when you're moving. You could, of course, move on a treadmill, but there are multiple pathways that physical activity may impact on cognition and executive functions. So the doses, of course, may be important, but there are also a lot of literature showing that different types of physical activity are really important. So the big question is, of course, how we can promote a good, healthy, good activity level in children over a long time, so children can lead long and active lives. And I just want to mention this paper by James. I think it's a really excellent paper, building on literature and perspective from other speakers in this symposium. And I think it's an excellent piece, raising the question of the role of ecological dynamics and exploration for lifelong physical activity habits. I think it's really a nice picture, and I guess James will be happy to extend on these perspectives afterwards. So that is one field that we're working with. At the same time, as I said, children spend most of their time today in the early childhood education setting. I'm not sure whether this is the typical situation of early childhood education, how you think of it. But we argue that the trends are going in this direction. So quite young children get more and more school-like preschool experiences. And we argue that this is against the best evidence of what they should have in this age group. So there is undisputed evidence about the value of play. And we know that children of this age, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 years, they should spend a lot of time playing. And what we see today is that play and exploration is displaced by other more formal instructional practices that are not very good, we think. So this is an excellent paper that really take into account or explains how schoolification of early childhood education has developed over the past years. So I think this is a really, there are a lot of tensions in this field relating to how this setting should progress. But of course, with the influx of economic efficiency models in this sector, they are shaping the sector. And for example, a lot of the result is around standards of learning and testing regimes. And we see that all over Europe, at least, there's been a lowering of the age children start school, but they're also a lowering because the preschool setting is getting more and more similar to the school setting with inappropriate instructional practices. We can see reduced adult-child ratios, which means that children often have less time to play and explore and be physically active because the staff need to keep children safe, maybe indoor, because it's easier to be safe indoors than outdoors. We see more and more structured curricula and also standards of learning with the introduction of testing regimes, which again leads to narrowing of curricula, because as you cannot measure everything, you will start to focus on things that you can measure, which means to quite a narrowing perspective on what should be learned in the preschool setting. There are also, of course, expectations from the school, because we want a good transition from preschool to school. So then the preschool setting is forced to prepare children for the type of instructional practices they meet in school. So that is also a challenge. And the most important is that there's quite clear evidence from developmental psychology that children are not ready for formal or instructional teaching methodologies in this age, because stress, suboptimal learning, poor motivation, and attitudes in the long run. And we know there's a lot of evidence showing that there are very positive benefits of learning through play, and especially over the long term. So the conclusions from this paper are very clear. There is no serious evidence to support the earlier is better position, and a very significant body of evidence to support the alternative view that the later school start might be advantageous. And there is increasing evidence that specific groups of children are being disadvantaged by the teaching approaches taken in education settings very early in a child's life. There's also a very nice report from Union of Education Norway that have provided a good perspective on where we are heading in the sector with OECD for the last 20 years, and pointing in the same direction to a unification of the sector, with less room for taking the cultural historical context and the environment into account, and also less room for movement, play, and exploration. And especially this study, often called the baby PISA, that have now been done in 3 countries in 5-year-olds. Of course, it's just a very good example of how this testing regime is shaping the curricula and shaping the everyday of the children. And you know a lot of criticism around PISA, and I will not go into that, but I think that's an important, very important example of the direction we're heading. At the same time, the OECD called for broader education goals. That is quite a paradox, I believe. They say you should foster knowledge, skills, attitudes, values, agency to thrive and navigate the complex and changing world. That is quite in contrast to quite narrow aims for these testing regimes. They also points to the value of critical thinking, creativity, curiosity, self-regulation, responsibility, and collaboration. These aspects are not easily measured, and at least not by standardized testing regimes. So we argue that we should play to learn. Exploration is also a universal concept in early childhood education, and thanks to Håvard for bringing this in, because an exploration is fundamental in many different early childhood education didactical approaches, such as guided play, sustained shared thinking, discovery learning, exploration as a dialogical engagement, experiential learning, and so on. So this is quite universal concepts in the field. So how should early childhood education pedagogy promote whole child development? Well, we argue that we could do that in a very good way, an appropriate way for the children, by integrating these three aspects and work with this nexus of movement, play, and exploration. I think that could be three really important cornerstones for a responsive, child-centered education. So our aim with this project is to develop and test a pedagogical approach that promotes this nexus. It kind of integrates the field of physical activity and public health, which have worked most, I would say, between movement and play. It also, and that is my research group, and we have collaborated strongly with another group within our university, quite strong in early childhood education and in general pedagogy and didactical practices. They have worked very much around play and exploration. And then I think movement sciences and ecological dynamics is a very nice bridge between movement exploration, of course, in this setting. So I think exploration is also a common denominator of these fields. But of course, the next step, that is, how can we get staff preschools doing this? That's a pretty difficult task. So there are, of course, the evidence is very mixed, but we have a couple of systematic reviews, meta-analysis, showing a very similar results regarding the effectiveness of interventions to promote physical activity and motor skills in this setting. And they are very similar in their results. So here are 16 studies summed up, showing that, I would argue, the type of studies that are interesting, that have external validity in terms of informing policymakers to do the right things in the sector in terms of how can we improve competence, they show that interventions are not successful. So interventions led by the staff and over the long time, they are not efficacious. We can show short-term effects when experts, external resource persons, researchers go into the preschool. But I would say, to be sustainable, this should of course be done by the staff, and those kind of interventions, they doesn't work. We see the same picture when we look at 30 studies that have studied motor skills. We see that the long-term and the interventions led by the childcare staff, they does not work very well. So we need also to develop competence around how can we do this in the best possible way. I think there are two things that are very important. I think competence is, of course, very important. When we have asked more than 400 staff from around 70 preschools in Sogn og Fjordane about their competence and their education related to physical activity, 80% say they have no education, they have no competence in physical activity. And of course, we know that when we work with physical education and educating students to be good physical education teachers, we know that competence is very important. So we need competence. One more thing I think is essential is that we are able to work as researchers together with staff, together with the sector in the best possible way to try to co-create interventions and models of collaboration that meet their needs in the best possible way. I think that is very, very important. So that means that we need to puzzle together a research project, a gold standard research project, typical randomized controlled trial with development efforts in the sector, so that the preschools and the staff can own this intervention. They can own their process and run their process and adapt to the contextual situation in their own setting. So this is just to sum up a little bit, but we have pointed towards 3 different knowledge needs that we're trying to combine in this project. And that is a need for integrated pedagogy and responsive didactic approaches to support broader education goals and development of the whole child. Also, the need for continuing professional development and a thorough process evaluation, so we are able to increase our understanding of what works, when, and for whom. We also need new and broader outcomes, and we need mixed methods research to have both a quantitative and a qualitative approach to understanding and getting a best possible account of how this kind of interventions and everyday practices work for the staff and also for the children. So our objective is, as I said, to develop and test a pedagogical approach, integrating this nexus as cornerstones for improved child development. And we will implement it through a model of professional development for preschool staff to solve these pressing challenges in the field of early childhood education and movement sciences and public health. So we will theorize on the move, play, explore nexus. So that is one part of the project. We will develop new outcomes of movement, competence, and creativity, which I think is really important in terms of the aims of the project, and also of well-being, to try to capture the effects of this pedagogical approach. We will test the intervention in a large number of preschools and children over 18 months using a randomized controlled design. And we will work in close collaboration with staff to fully integrate this pedagogical approach in their daily practices to allow for a best possible implementation of this intervention. So this is the intervention model. So at the right side, you can see the model here. This is what we want the child to experience in the preschool setting. Our intervention, though, is with the staff. So we will run about a 7-month professional development, and we will develop and use quite extensive e-learning resources to try to increase the reach in the best possible way. But we will do this in co-creation with the staff and with the sector, because that's the only way we can arrive at models that they really need and make use of. And then there will be a process evaluation and an effect evaluation of the whole study. So we have designed 6 work packages regarding the conceptual groundwork, of course, of the theoretical perspectives. And I think that's also really important for the acceptance of this kind of interventions in the sector, because we are not competing. We are not competing with the pedagogical thoughts in the sector. We are trying to work together. I think that's really important. So we need an overall thinking around that. We need to develop measures, and we have plans to develop assessment of functional movement, competence, and creativity, taking into account that movement is embodied and embedded in line with an ecological worldview. We will co-create professional development and an e-learning toolbox. We will use an RCT, including at least 50 preschools, 500 children aged 4. The intervention will target all children in preschool, all age groups, but we have planned an effect evaluation on the 4-year-olds, using multiple measures of whole child development. We will have a process evaluation on the staff and child level. And of course, I think also the last work package is really important in terms of trying to communicate these results in multiple channels and reach different fields. That is, I think, could be a great challenge, but I hope we will succeed with doing that. And I will just spend a few more minutes because I will present this project, because the Move Early project is building on this project. This is a project that we are in the 3rd year now of completing this project. We will finish interventions and data collection in the spring. So then it have been going on for 3 years. And so we have done a bit of this already, but the Move Early project will be a further broadening of this project, and we will of course take all our knowledge and experiences so far and further develop and try to make an even better intervention. So this is also a cluster randomized controlled trial. We are in the end of wave 2 at the moment with the preschools. In this project, we're also working towards an enriched environment, trying to connect 4 different types of physical activity. Physical activity of moderate to vigorous intensity, motor challenging physical activity, cognitively engaging physical active play, and also physical active learning. They kind of have their different origins in different fields and so on, but we are trying to integrate these 4 and up with an intervention that the children will experience as meaningful and joyful. Yeah. So participants in this study, we have 46 preschools, more than 1,200 children, more than 300 staff. So we have been working now for 2 years with 23 preschools and 77 staff. That is both directors and teachers and also other staff in the preschools. And they also had the opportunity to complete this professional development with credits, which I also think is really important. We have worked in this way with the preschools already, and we have pretty good experiences of how this can be done. Just a short example of how we have worked, because I think this theory is really simple. And we have worked with this, and in our meeting and teaching with staff, we have said that, okay, there's 3 ways to increase physical activity in preschool. So you can, let me ask you, can you add something? Can you add something to your daily schedule? Or can you do more of something that you already do, that you have good experience with, that works? Or can you improve quality of the things you're already doing? And this have been our starting point with the preschool, because I've asked the directors, I've asked the teachers these questions. And then much of the development work have been on the preschool side to try to see, okay, what can we do based on where we are at the moment, based on our staff, our motivation, our outdoor spaces, indoor spaces, what can we do? I'm not going through this, but this has been a 7-month process with a lot of different things, getting together physically, theory, practical sessions, e-learning, and so on. And I think this is an important point, because we offer credits. So we now have a 15-credit education. So the intervention is a 15 credits course, which is approved at our university. We can run it at any time. So it's not an intervention that is dead. It's there, we can run it. Someone have to fund it, but we can run it at any time. And that is also, we will also do it similarly in the Move Early project. We have a toolbox, which we have received a lot of very good feedback on. So there are e-learning resources here about these different components. I'm sorry, this is in Norwegian, but different e-learning tools, webinars, and so on that are available for the preschools to use at any time in their preschool. We have 200 activities because the teachers and the staff, they want it simple. They want something they can use right here, right now. So this is one page for the children. So this is the children's page, and then there's some instructions on the back side. And this has been very, very valuable. The main problem, of course, is how this is received and how the staff is able to work with the children. And as you said, Håvard, it's quite typical in instructional approach in PE. We also see the same thing here. It's depending on the competence, of course, of the staff, but in many cases, they are a bit more instructional than we would like it to be. So I think that will be a main challenge in this project, try to work with the staff of how can we do this with young children? And I hope we will succeed doing that. So that is, of course, how can staff work with children, and how can we work with the staff? So it's kind of a long shot, but I think that's the way to go. So this is just some pictures from the Aadland study of how we have been working in different settings, theoretical, practical, group works, and so on, try to define and understand the intervention. Yeah, so we are about to complete this project. So this is just a suggested timeline of the studies. I hope this project we will be able to start really soon. So I am waiting to start. Okay, thank you.